Hosni Mubarak got more votes in the free election last month than he got in the rigged election 6 years previously. I'm not making that up. He got 84.8% of the vote 6 years ago, and in the free election he got 88.6%. But getting 88.6% of the vote is something people like me can only dream of. But that's what they got in Egypt. So I'm making the point to you, what do you think they think in Egypt? They don't know whether to laugh or cry when they hear Bush talking about democracy. Because they've just been landed with a grinning buffoon for president for the next 6 years, as a prelude to his son taking over, with 88.6% of the vote, even though hardly anybody voted for him. So they don't know whether to laugh or cry. Or does the general, do you remember him? The general. Mr. Bush was interviewed just before the first presidential election. Do you remember? And he was asked the names of some of the world leaders that he would be dealing with if he got elected. And the interviewer said, who's the leader of Pakistan? And Bush looked a bit shy and he said, the general. And the interviewer said, I mean, can you be a bit more specific? Maybe a name? And Bush thought for a moment, or 5, and shrugged and said, we just call him the general. The general in question was General Musharraf, who seized power in a military coup, was suspended from the British Commonwealth, put on an arms embargo list, described as a military dictator until Bush needed him. Then he remembered his name, except by then he was no longer called the general. He was called the president, Mr. President, and his pockets were stuffed with money and his armory was stuffed with weapons. And when he got nuclear weapons, Mr. Bush didn't threaten to invade him or impose sanctions upon him. He rewarded him for obtaining nuclear weapons. So much for checking nuclear proliferation. So I could go on all night, but I'm being told I'm going on too long already. I could go on all night. I could give you example after example, from Uzbekistan to Nigeria. I could go across the world and show you places where the United States is propping up and making possible the most brutal dictators rule over their people. And that is the second of the real principal reasons why this swamp of hatred has been endlessly deepened in the way that I have described. And of course, the third and most current reason why is the enormous crime that has been committed against the people of Iraq. I spent a lot of years trying to rouse the people of the West about the unbelievable disaster that was unfolding in Iraq, where 1 million Iraqis, most of them children, most of them dead before they ever got to know that they were Iraqis, because they were too young. For more than a decade, an Iraqi child died every 6 minutes of every day and every night as a result of that embargo. It's the biggest mass grave in Iraq, but it's the one mass grave you can be sure Fox TV will not be filming, will not be at the exhumation of its victims, for its victims were victims of us, men in suits, elegant barbarians in the offices of the United Nations in New York, making decisions that caused the slaughter of 1 million children. Now again, most people in the West didn't want to know about that. They were only Iraqis, they were only Arabs, they were only Muslims. But no Muslim ever forgot it. And it's another of the major reasons why that swamp got ever deeper. But the biggest lie, all the lies that they told, was the lie that the Iraqi people would welcome hundreds of thousands of foreign soldiers invading their country, seizing their territory, parking their tanks on every street corner, their soldiers kicking in doors, rampaging through their women's bedrooms, taking off their sons blindfolded, hands tied behind their backs, to places like Abu Ghraib prison, where they'd strip them naked, pile them on top of each other, force them to commit indecent acts against each other, menace them with savage dogs, attach fake electrodes to their genitals and pretend that they're about to electrocute them, and videotape it all for a laugh in the barracks afterwards. They thought the Iraqis would welcome this. What kind of a racist fantasy is this? That of all the people on the earth, Iraqis would welcome hundreds of thousands of foreigners invading their country and stealing their wealth, carving their country up like a shawarma and handing it out piece by piece to Halliburton and Bechtel and Kellogg and Brown and Root and all the other crooks that financially supported the re-election of George W. Bush. Why should the Iraqis be less than us? Well, it could never happen to you, but it almost happened to us in 1941 when we stood alone against fascism, which was at the Channel ports 21 miles from our country. If Hitler had crossed the Channel and occupied our country, every British person with any self-respect, whether they supported Churchill or not, would have fought the German invasion of our country with every last breath and with their teeth if necessary. And that's what the Iraqis are doing in the wake of the foreign invasion of their country. And a conversation like this might take place. Are you sure this is a good idea? What if these people become free? What if they win and they become free and their country ends up being run by a lot of bigoted fundamentalists like the Reverend Pat Robertson and George W. Bush and Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld? And Fox would answer, that's up to them. No one can choose the government of the United States of America except the people of the United States of America. And no one can choose the government of Iraq other than the people of Iraq. And you have to be clear about that question.